Amidst a changing regulatory landscape will start now. Please welcome Mr. Dan Connolly from UK Fashion and Textile Association.
Can you hear okay? There we go. Firstly, thank you very much for having me today. Thank you very much to Messe Frankfurt Hong Kong and to everyone here, because we're very excited to be in Vietnam for the first time as UKFT. There is a lot going on at the moment in the world, as some of you may have noticed, so this is a really exciting opportunity for us to be here this week. Over the course of this presentation, I will give a bit of an overview of the UK market at the moment and also talk a little bit about compliance and regulations. So to start, and to give you a bit of an overview of who UKFT is, we are the largest network for fashion and textiles in the UK. We represent a whole industry, fashion and textiles, which is one of our biggest strengths and also one of our biggest challenges, because the fashion and textile industry is incredibly diverse and represents a lot of different sectors. So we do a lot on skills and training. We're the sector skills body for fashion and textiles. We do a huge amount on sustainability and innovation. So UKFT is involved in a number of government projects aiming to drive sustainability in a meaningful way within the UK fashion and textile industry. We help businesses with manufacturing. We do a lot on international trade and trying to promote British businesses overseas, helping British businesses to trade. And increasingly we are doing more and more on compliance as this becomes more of an issue for our companies. We are also very lucky to have a royal president in Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal, King Charles's sister. She's incredibly passionate about UK manufacturing, about UK industry, and she is a great champion of us. So yeah, here's again a bit of an overview of what we do. So manufacturing, skills and training. We also represent the industry to governments. We do a lot of talking with governments on a daily basis on a range of different topics. And again, international business, innovation and sustainability. Now, I mentioned that the UK industry is incredibly diverse, but it's also got a lot of, it's one of the best known industries in the world. So this last weekend we had London Fashion Week. In London we have some of the best designers in the world, some really renowned brands that are household names throughout the world. So people like Burberry, Alexander McQueen, Vivienne Westwood. But we also have an incredible textile industry. So we saw at the Dior Cruise Show last year how popular the Scottish textiles were in that beautiful setting. A lot of those textiles came from Harris Tweed Hebrides, manufactured in the Hebrides. Education is a huge part of what we do as well. Central St Martin's, London College of Fashion, Chelsea School of Art are some of the most renowned schools in the world for fashion and for textiles. Now, one of the reasons that we're in Vietnam this week is because there are now a lot of opportunities for the UK sector here. We, as some of you may have noticed, we left the European Union a few years ago, and trade has been a little difficult for UK businesses, as we will look into a bit later. However, recently the UK joined CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, which Vietnam is also a member of. So we have been attending a lot of events over the last couple of days, and will continue to do so whilst we're here, to better understand what the opportunities are for British businesses in Vietnam. The UK also has a bilateral free trade agreement with Vietnam, so this is a real opportunity for growth. In 2024, British exports to Vietnam grew by 9.9%, and also we read the other day that Ho Chi Minh City is the second fastest growing economy in the world for a city, so this is a very exciting place to be for UK businesses. Now, this is a little film which gives you a taste of the quality of British textiles. So I think that video speaks a little bit to the quality and the craftsmanship of UK textiles, which I hope are attributes that the Vietnamese market is going to really appreciate over the next couple of days. So to give a little overview of the UK fashion and textile industry in numbers, we commissioned an economic report a couple of years ago, because I think that there is often a temptation in the UK to think of our industry purely as a creative one that does a lot for soft power. Now, it certainly does that. It's hugely important to our soft power around the world, but the fashion and textile industry is also an enormous economic driver in our country. So the industry is worth £62 billion in gross value added to the economy. The industry provides 1.3 million jobs, which is the equivalent of 1 in every 25 jobs. Our industry also provides 1 in 30 pounds of the total HMRC tax intake. So again, this shows the value of our industry to the government. And more than 4 billion items of fashion are bought by UK consumers each year. We are a nation of shoppers with a real passion and appreciation for good quality clothing. Now, going back, we have had some challenges to overcome in the last few years when it comes to trade, particularly when it comes to clothing exports. We can see on the table on the left that these are figures for textile exports from the UK to the rest of the world, and these have remained relatively stable over the course of the last 7 years. Whereas we see that our clothing exports have fallen quite significantly over the last 7 years. However, the percentage of clothing being exported to the rest of the world from the UK has grown quite significantly. Now, it should be added that for the table on the right, we know that this is not the full picture, as a lot of companies are now deciding to export directly from the EU or from the nation where they're manufacturing. So not all goods are coming back through the UK and then being re-exported, so don't count towards these figures. But I think it shows that it's really important that the UK is no longer as reliant on the EU as a market, and that we start to look elsewhere at exciting new markets such as Vietnam, such as Southeast Asia as a whole, at what the opportunities are for British businesses. Then on the import front, we can see that actually the figures have remained relatively steady, both from a fashion and a textiles point of view over the last few years. So we really see that the issue for UK companies has not been so much in importing, but more on an export point of view. And this graph shows our top importing nations for clothing. Now, Bangladesh and China are ahead by a long way, but we're seeing that other nations are starting to catch up, and we expect that over the course of the next few years, Vietnam will start to figure much more prominently in these figures. We also see that the EU is still a very important import market for the UK. Now, as of 2023, these were the figures for UK and Vietnam trade when it came to fashion and textiles. So the UK clearly imports a lot more from Vietnam than it exports. £457 million worth of clothing was imported from Vietnam into the UK, and £56 million of clothing were exported from the UK to Vietnam. Then we see that the garment manufacturing industry in Vietnam is very important, and that the textile industry still is fairly important, with £65 million worth of fabric exported from Vietnam into the UK. Now, it's worth noting that these figures were from 2023, and a lot has changed since then, that the UK and Vietnam relationship continues to go from strength to strength. The UK has joined CPTPP, and that relationship is growing. So we would expect that the figures from 2024 will be much higher than this. Now, moving on to some of the compliance issues and what this means for companies post-Brexit, I think that by and large, a lot of what UK regulations represent are very similar to EU regulations. So in general, the EU is still the UK's largest export market. So British companies by and large have to comply with all EU regulations. So that means that in general, most of the new UK regulations are 99% the same as the EU regulations, but with different reporting authorities and slight differences of nuance. So when we look at REACH, so registration, evaluation, authorization, restriction of chemicals, the UK has adopted a slightly different version of the EU policy. So REACH applies to the majority of chemical substances manufactured in or imported into Great Britain. Now, the aim of REACH is to provide a high level of protection of human health and the environment, to make the people who place chemicals on the market responsible for managing the risks associated with their use, and also to promote the use of alternative methods for the assessment of the hazardous properties of substances. These are very similar to the EU REACH rules, but again, a slightly different take on it and slightly different reporting authorities. When it comes to labelling and standards, again, most British companies, as they are exporting to the EU or going to be shipping through the EU, have to comply to the EU regulations. Again, the UK follows very similar requirements, but has its own standards and enforcement mechanisms on this. Now, green claims is quite a big topic in the UK at the moment. The UK is committed to producing very high quality, very ethically sourced products. This fits in very well with what we're looking to do, and again, works to our advantage, but we're always looking to work out what the best way to avoid green claims is. So UKFT will be producing a set of guidelines on how to manage green claims. There's a wide range of different regulations that are being discussed at the moment. One of them is PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, which are also known as forever chemicals. So the UK government's legislative agenda in the area of sustainability has not yet been agreed, and this is something that the UK government will be looking at over the course of the next year. So if you're interested in this, please do keep following what UKFT is doing, and we'll make sure to contact you about this. Again, when it comes to corporate sustainability and due diligence, the UK is ahead of the game when it comes to the Modern Slavery Act, which goes above and beyond most of the other regulations in the world, as the UK is really keen to support ethical and transparent supply chains around the world. So UK companies are often held to much higher standards than many of its competitors to ensure that this is done as fairly and as ethically as possible. The UK's Modern Slavery Act also looks a lot at forced labour and how we can look to avoid that in all instances. There are some complications on this at times, but in general, the UK's Modern Slavery Act has been regarded as being ahead of its time and puts the UK ahead of many other nations. Now, tariffs, many people have said, is the word of 2025 so far, thanks to a certain president. Trade within the EU is still tariff-free. The UK is no longer part of the EU, so we're looking at different ways to find a competitive edge for British businesses. That's one of the reasons that we've joined CPTPP, and also why the UK is looking at other potential arrangements that could be interesting for British businesses. So one of them is the Pan-Euromed Convention, which covers a lot of Europe and North Africa as well. So this would potentially be very beneficial for UK companies who are manufacturing in North Africa or who are sourcing a lot of their products from there, which a lot of our companies do. So UKFT is talking a lot with the British government at the moment to try and work out how we can find the best solution for the UK to potentially enter Japan. Now, this has been a bit of a whistle-stop tour to talk about the UK fashion and textile industry. We have a stand on AD25, so please come and talk to us over the course of the next few days. We have a booklet, which should be around somewhere, which will tell you more about British fashion and textiles. There's also a translation into Vietnamese. So if you have any questions, please feel free to come and speak. Oh, sorry, did you have a question? You can. Sorry. Sure. Oh, I think there's a microphone coming.
This is Besim, I'm from Turkey. I get a question. For example, you told us that the UK is going to apply the digital product passport issues as same as the Europe. But as far as I know, some, some countries in Europe is going to start applying them to 2027. Some of them is going to be 2026. So when are you going to start that? And it's true for the EPR, for example. Will we have a legislation through for example, are you going to be asking minimum 20% recycled content in the fabrics or not? Just like the rest of the EU.
So those are two very good questions. The UK has not decided yet what its EPR scheme is going to look like. We're doing a lot of talking with government to make sure that this is a scheme that works really well for businesses and is very business friendly. We would imagine that this would be quite similar to the EU one. We're not sure when it will come into play. When it comes to digital product passports, again, the most likely outcome I would say is that it will be more likely to be in 2027 rather than in 2026 along the lines of the rest of the EU. But this hasn't been decided yet. As you say, it's quite complicated and confusing that other nations within the EU are moving ahead and doing things quicker rather than adopting an EU-wide policy. So I don't have specific answers on that yet, as the UK government hasn't decided, but it's something that we will keep informing our members about, and I'm sure in a year's time we'll have some interesting things to say. Perfect. Well, as I say, we'll be on stand AD25 for the rest of the week. So if you want to come by and talk about British textiles, then I'd be delighted to see you then. Thank you very much for your time.
Cảm ơn Mr. Dan Connolly của thương hiệu UK Fashion Textile Association.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dan Connolly from UK Fashion and Textile Association. And our seminar will end from here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, maybe you know. That's it. I'm a board member. My company.